We're running a little late, but we're right on time. And the next up is Evan Ryan, who's a board member. Where's Evan? Right there. Who's a board member here. Give it up for Evan. He's going to do a demonstration on aerated compost tea. And what we'd like to do each month for now until eternity is to have a demonstration around something that we're doing on our farm, whether it be compost tea or bokashi or IMOs or anything like that. So that's what you're going to have coming at you in the next months to come. Okay? All right, Evan.
And that's also an assignment for you that any of you have something you want to share, come talk to us and let us know, or you know someone who'd be really good at bringing some useful skill to this group. Support that creativity.
Absolutely.
And I don't think I'm going to use this. If I don't.
Okay. Want me to hold it for you?
No.
Everybody can hear?
Yep.
Booming voice.
So I'm really into soil regeneration, and in light of what Jonathan talked about, which is like landfill teas, is basically like all the juices filtering through the landfill rather than going out to the land. It's one way we have a very toxic environment here, but years of sugarcane practices, years of pineapple practices, in addition to soil degradation and the loss of topsoil that's been going on for the past 100, 200 years, started with deforestation before that. We also have toxic things in our land and in our soils. And is anyone here growing on old pineapple land or sugarcane land? Yeah, I'm lying. So, whether you are or not, I would say at least 99% of the people on land on this island are dealing with degraded soils and soil that they're not starting with topsoil. So the question is like, how do we renew that? And to me, the way I like to renew that more than anything is creating habitat and inoculating microbes into my soil. Specifically, microorganisms, funguses, protozoas, algae, nematodes, like all the good things, getting all the good things back into the soil. And I do that more than anything by adding organic matter to my soil. And then following that process, it's through aerated compost tea. That's what I do. Is anyone doing aerated compost tea right now? Cool. It's a good handful, yeah. And it's a rocking system. And aerated, start with that basic concept. This is my air pump. An air pump can be like a little aquarium pump and going into a 5-gallon bucket. And it can be that simple and small. And there's, I don't know how many, there's as many ways to make compost tea as there are people. And there's ways to go wrong making compost tea. It's important to know. But basically this is my air pump. Sucks in air, pumps it through these tubes, through these little stones, and into a 55-gallon drum. That's how I do it. Every couple of weeks I brew 55 gallons of compost tea, and I spray that all over my land. And my plants love it. I've set up systems for 4 different farms on this island, and I see dramatic shifts when compost tea is being sprayed. One of my clients actually, they don't spray regularly. They spray like every couple of months when I show up. It's the only time they spray. And it's amazing. Like I can spray and then I can come back a week later and see the shifts that transpire, and it's remarkable. And the basic concept is that through creating a brew, so for me it's a 55-gallon drum, maybe for some of you it's 5 gallons, whatever it is. But I'll share my recipe and what I do personally. And one of the things I add is worm castings. Worm castings, worm poop. So I got a worm bin, take my worm poop, I put it in this little bag. You can go to some of the stores and you can buy a nice $25 to $50 nylon bag, or you can go to a hardware store and get a little cake straightener for $1. So that's what this is, they rock. So I put about a quart of worm castings in one, about a quart of compost in another of my compost. And I take a stone, and I put a stone in each one of these bags, inside the bag, so it's actually getting direct air. And then I just seal it. And what I use to seal it is, I don't even know what to call this, a little bit of wire, basically from drip irrigation systems. So just wrap that around there, keeps the stone in there, keeps the compost in there. And then that goes into my 55-gallon drum. And if you're doing a smaller scale, use less. So both those go in there with the stone. on them. I add about a quart of humic acid, which this is the humic acid I use. It's a powder, and it comes from, it's a forest source from the West Coast. And specifically, it's a company called Baseline, and I get it at Eco Island Supply in Haiku. And this is, and maybe someone else has some additional information for me, but as far as I know, what the humic acid is good for, it's good for feeding funguses and in the compost tea. And the source of your humic acid really makes a difference. And most humic acid that you'll find in garden stores comes from leonardite, which as far as compost tea is my understanding, it doesn't serve to add it from leonardite. Does anyone else know? Anyone else familiar? No? Yeah, does anyone else add humic acid? Okay, so then the question I was going to have is, you're probably not getting the humic acid I'm getting, so where are you getting it?
We use Humax.
Humax, okay, yeah, which you get from CVS, right? Is that where you get it?
No, I get a piece of
Oh, okay, so you order it from offline, yeah. So, which is what they do. And Eco Island Supply, it's 5-gallon buckets of it. It's about $70, $80. They last a long time. So it's a great price. They often don't have it, so you just have to request that they get a pallet of it, and they'll get it. Another thing that I add is fish hydrolysate, which is just like fish emulsion, except it's cold pressed instead of hot pressed. And when you heat it, so it's basically all the remnants from the fish industry, and they boil it down or break it down or squeeze it down into a liquid form. And when you heat it, it's not so accessible for the microorganisms and the funguses and bacteria to access in the compost tea. So fish hydrolysate is what I recommend. Another source? Do you order that too, or do you use that?
Yeah, I get 200 gallons at a time, so it's pretty relatively inexpensive compared to on-island sources, but you do want the low temperature enzyme digest.
So far on the same page. But again, there's many different ways to do the right thing. And otherwise, I add soluble seaweed powder to my mix, which is a small amount. I think I just add a couple cups of it. Or not even, I had 1 cup of soluble seaweed powder form, maxi crop powder is another option for that, which is getting chemicals in that. And basically what I'm doing through this process is I've added this compost into this bin, and what's in here is my inoculants. And here is my microorganisms, my funguses, protozoa, beneficial nematodes. So all this good stuff that I really want in my soil, and I want spread out throughout my soil. And then, by adding all these other ingredients, the humic acid, the fish hydrolysate, the soluble seaweed powder, I'm adding food for this good stuff that I want. And the main ingredient of food is the air factor. So basically, if in a handful of compost I have billions of microorganisms, then when I put these in here and I add all these ingredients and I aerate it for 18 to 24 hours within that realm. And by aerating it, I basically make billions times billions. And then I get this anyone know what billion times billions? It's a whole lot. And then I get this tea that I can then spread throughout my land. And what I'm doing when I spread that tea is I'm just inoculating. And I'm inoculating everything. So it's covering the leaves, it's covering the ground, and it's basically taking over the surface area of my land and inoculating it with good things. And what those good things are doing is they're squeezing out bad things. So, nematode issues are huge here. There's all sorts of funguses and negative things going on in our soils, and by inoculating it with good things, when you have such a good population of good things, they're going to take over the things that are damaging. So by consistently doing that, I'm not dealing with a lot of issues per se. I'm not dealing with a lot of funguses, and I'm dealing with a lot of really good plant growth and nutrient uptake increasing on a really large scale and making nutrients bioavailable. And this concept of compost tea, there's basic compost teas and there's aerated compost tea. And compost teas are age-old. As long as there's been farming, there's been people who've been pouring stuff on their plants. And it could be put a shovel full of poop in a bucket, fill it with water and let it sit for a few days, and then pour it out on your plants. It's going to be really good. So, and in addition to inoculating with all these good living things on my plants, I'm just adding good ingredients. I'm getting humic acid onto my land every couple of weeks, trace amounts of it. and fish hydrolysate and soluble seaweed powder. So basically trace feed my plants in a very soluble form, soluble meaning like liquid form almost, that the plants can instantly uptake. Because a lot of the stuff we tend to add to our soils aren't instantly bioavailable for the plants. So by putting this liquid out there on the leaves, they're just taking it in right away. And on the ground, they're just sucking it up right away through the roots. So, yeah.
Your amendments are traveling a really long way to get here.
They are.
And may or may not be it from a renewable resource, so I'm wondering what can we use here that's of equivalence that's also sustainable and renewable?
So the question is regarding how we can localize this process. And fully, I don't know is the answer. And on a small level, is like you got worm castings that are local and compost that is local. You put this in a bucket with aeration, you're doing the same process. You're just not feeding as well. If you want to feed a little bit better, you could add some sugarcane juice. Give it some sugar, which will get the bacteria content out. Which will shoot the bacteria content out. I prefer not to stay away from sugars because there's enough in the compost, but it's a way that you can really activate it. So that alone is a really good compost tea. Just this with some air. Or even just this with some water. Take out the electrolyte. We do that as well. Otherwise, one thing I forgot to mention is that I do add mycorrhizal also. After the tea is completed brewing, I add mycorrhizal. So it's a way of getting mycorrhizal funguses out on my land consistently. But soluble seaweed powder, go to the beach, collect some seaweed. Throw that in your bucket, it's going to be the same thing. Fish hydrolysate, go to the fish market. You're going to get a whole bunch of fish guts and bones, and that's all it is. It really is. So the only thing I don't have an answer for on that would be collecting mycorrhizal, because I've never done it, but there's a movement starting to get localized sources of mycorrhizal, collecting them. And the other aspect is the humic acids, which there is humic acid in compost, but not to this quantity. And as far as a localized source of humic acid, I have no clue what this does and what can do.
What is that humic acid from?
I don't fully know the full cycle of it, but it's a forest source. And that's my only understanding of it. Yeah, so I don't know is the answer. The general humic acid we get, which is from lenodite, is a byproduct of the coal industry. So, and this would be a more sustainable source of it. Does anyone have an idea for humic acid, local source of humic acid?
You have to dilute with water, the 5-gallon bucket, and if you do how much harvest, how much rain you spray?
You mean once it's brewed? So after 18-24 hours, it's ready to spray on the land. I'll dilute up to 3 to 1, and you don't have to dilute it. You can use straight. So it just kind of depends on the scale that we're talking about. If you're brewing enough to cover your whole land, great, use it straight. But you can't dilute it. And you can dilute it as much as you want, but once you get beyond the 3 to 1, diluting. And you have to use it within about 6 hours. So ideally, like you finish brewing and you spray, just like that. And that's how it's for me. I turn off my aeration and it's sprayed out within an hour.
How much from quarter acre?
That's about 2 acres, I guess.
2 acres for a 5-gallon bucket?
No, I use it for a 5-gallon drum.
Oh, okay.
How about molasses, is that a good idea?
You can. For me, I'm getting enough sugars in my compost. And it's a commonly used thing in it. And what I noticed in using molasses is that I get aphid issues when I'm using molasses. So I cut it out and I'm still getting great results in terms of life in my teas.
You said there are some things you could do wrong in making it. Can you see what are the...
So there's a big issue with sterility, which is that if I brew tea in this bucket and I spray it out and then I don't clean my bucket, and I said I need to spray it right away because it's really like 5 to 6 hours it starts to turn really bad. What turn really bad means is it becomes anaerobic and the microorganisms, the ones, the beneficial ones, and funguses get taken over by harmful ones that are actually damaging to the soil. And then they could just colonize my container in like the film essentially of the tea. And then the next time I go to brew, instead of just inoculating with good beneficial stuff, I'm inoculating with some really harmful things. So So sterility is really important, cleaning properly, which is cleaning your bucket, cleaning off the aeration, so cleaning off these stones really well. And it can be different things you can use. You can use it food-grade hydrogen peroxide. Some people use bleach, some people use OxyClean. Familiar with that?
How long does it take you to spray 2 acres?
It takes an hour. It takes me about an hour. And there's different ways to spray. If you're in a home system and you've got about this amount, it might be like a little 2-gallon spray. You could even put it in a watering can and pour it over your plants and on the garden. I have a transfer pump from Ace Hardware, $170 transfer pump. Basically, it plumbs into my 55-gallon drum, gravity's to it, because it's on the ground, plumbing in the bottom of the drum, plumbs to it, and then that pump in there, centrifuge, is shooting it through the hose line. So I'm basically spraying a hose, like a garden hose, just like I just turned on the hose tip. And the challenges with that, though, to be aware of, is that that centrifuge can kill a lot of bacteria, can kill a lot of funguses, a lot of the good stuff. I'm losing potentially up to 50% by doing that. But it's what I found to be effective in terms of just time, because I guess you didn't get that much coverage. And they sell pumps that are efficient, that aren't doing that kind of energy with the microwaves.
Where do you get your pump from?
This pump was from Mahana Greenhouse Supply, Equal Island Supply. Also has pumps that have just been out of them recently.
How much are they?
Less than $100.
What about growing it longer? Like if you think you're going to get to it tomorrow, but then you get busy, is that what happens after 24 hours?
The population starts to go down. One way to manage it could be to turn it off and then turn it back on. There's a way some people manage it, but really you want to, ideally you just do it right, and that like you have time the next day to brew it, to spray it, and you just time it like that, so it turns on one day. And this is like maybe a 5-minute process for me to set the thing up, and then an hour to spray, and then maybe 10 to 15 minutes to clean up.
If you have any more questions, see Evan afterwards. We want to move on to the next session.